I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, numbers were in the news this week, including polls showing a clear leader in the gubernatorial runoff, as well as time lapsed in police response to emergency calls, a decline in the murder rate, and 4 and 4, which for the Saints, who are now at mid-season, provides some encouragement. We'll look at those stories tonight, as well as our Future Watch segment, which examines a plan by the coroner's office to reduce violence. And our number are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Mike Perlstein, reporter, WWL-TV, Channel 4. Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter. And Jeff Duncan, sports columnist, NOLA.com, the Times Picayune. I'm going to go over to Mike first. Mike, you and your colleagues there at Channel 4, David Hammer and Katie Moore, along with the New Orleans Advocate, have been doing an extensive series over the past couple of weeks, really, reporting on the response times by NOPD, and they're not looking too good right now.
That's correct. And we charted all of the response times going back to 2010. And that's at the same time that the police force lost 400 officers, down from 1,600 to about 1,200. And we found that for all calls, the average response time went from 24 minutes to 1 hour and 19 minutes. And if you break down the code 2 emergency calls, you know, life in danger, that actually went from 10 to 20 minutes, which was quite alarming, especially, you know, when we've seen, you know, the restaurant robberies uptown, the bar robbery, where, you know, in the case of Restaurant Patois, 17 minutes to get there. And clearly this is something that's being felt among victims throughout the city. We also did a pretty sophisticated analysis. We crunched 2.7 million individual calls for service, which enabled us to break down the calls response time by district, by, you know, police code. We found that by far the slowest response times were in the 7th District, comprised mostly of Eastern New Orleans, 9th Ward. And that matches some of the things that we've heard and reported on anecdotally of individuals waiting for hours, sometimes days after calling the police. Sometimes in, you know, dire situations. A home invasion ended up turning into a carjacking when police didn't show up when called. Showed up 9 hours later, car's long gone, and, you know, one crime has turned into an even worse crime. So
many ramifications here. I mean, obviously people depend upon the police for their safety, and when you need someone, when you're feeling threatened, you want police help right then and there. But then there's also solving the crimes. If right. You know, if the evidence isn't collected for a day or two, that's going to impact any kind of prosecution.
Has so many negative ramifications, starting with it artificially deflates your crime statistics. We found that a full 24%, because of such slow response times, 24% were marked up either unfounded or gone on arrival. Well, police, even the police chief, Michael Harrison, was the first to admit that 24% of those 911 calls are not unfounded, that people either couldn't wait any longer, had to leave, and at that point, you know, they have to clean up the mess from the burglary, or, you know, get a new door, window, and evidence is lost, so it keeps them from being able to solve a crime. Victims get frustrated, lose confidence in the police. Some
witnesses are nowhere to be found.
Witnesses
at that point too, right?
Long gone. I mean, the most, you know, horrific case we ran across, just as we're about to launch the series, was the tourist from San Diego who got into sort of a road rage fight, beaten, paralyzed. Police were called immediately. They did not get to that scene until 40 minutes later, over at the corner of Decatur and Frenchman. The result was they marked it unfounded. And this guy remained in the hospital 10 days, paralyzed from the neck down, without police responding to take a report. Once they finally got all of that through coverage in the media, they were able to get video, pinpoint a license plate, and get the suspect to turn himself in right away.
What's the reasoning from NOPD? What is their excuses for this?
Well, the manpower is down 400, and that's just something that, as we've chronicled in, you know, previous reports, even warnings at the time from then Police Chief Ronald Surpass to the mayor, you know, you can't stop hiring, which they did for 3 years. So it dried up the pipeline of recruits. Now they're in a position of, with this depleted manpower, they're hit with what the police chief called a perfect storm. The consent decree is adding additional burdens, paperwork, probably necessary reform, but it comes at a time when you just don't have the manpower. You're stretched so thin. So, you know, it is one of those problems that even before we ran the series, it was getting a lot of attention. The main crime-fighting initiative by the police chief, Operation Relentless Pursuit, includes as one of its key platforms is reducing response times.
Mm-hmm. Well, this obviously is very dismaying, but it's also frightening. What is the police department doing about it? What is Chief Harrison doing?
Okay, he has launched a number of initiatives, and it started actually, you know, some months back with the burglar alarm ordinance. There's a good chunk of, you know, active burglar alarm is actually a code to emergency, and it turns out that a large percentage of those are false alarms. So an ordinance that would basically hold the alarm company and resident or the property owner or business owner responsible for false alarms by starting to fine them. He's doing some electronic reporting where certain nonviolent property crimes can simply be reported by someone online, you know, filling out a form. He's done some telephone reporting. Once again, officers on desk duty can simply take, you know, things like burglaries or car break-ins after the fact over the phone and not take valuable response time from officers on the street who, you know, they cannot make all of the calls. The 7th District, which again has the worst response times, we found call backlogs topping 50 calls, all waiting. These are actual, you know, victims waiting on police.
Quickly, the IG, the Inspector General, has called for better use of manpower. Are we seeing some shifting?
Right, that's always an issue. Deployment. The Inspector General points out a couple things. One, that the department's top-heavy, more supervisors and fewer, you know, platoon officers on the street, and then officers in desk jobs that could possibly be replaced by civilians.
Yeah.
Chief Harrison has moved on both of those, and he's saying he's made changes, more to come.
But Mike, I've been hearing the thing about the officers on desk jobs for years. Every time there's a spike, someone says, we got to move people from desk jobs. I would think there wouldn't even be any desks left now. I mean, that they've done this so many times. Is that not having any effect?
There is sort of a continual push and pull on those issues. So, you know, do we need officers working a pawn shop, you know, sort of a specialty assignment, which is more desk than street? You're not responding to radio calls. Do we need them doing fugitive, which ties them up in court, doing paperwork, mostly at a desk? But officers would say this is something where you need the expertise of a police officer, not just a civilian replacement.
So I know you guys are going to continue to be looking into this, and there's
Yes.
so many other issues involved,
Many
including
follow-ups.
recruitment and building up the police department. So
Exactly.
I think excellent series, and
Thank you.
WWL and also the New Orleans Advocate. Okay, over to Errol. Some news breaking this week, certainly, regarding our governor's
Well, there were
race.
some polls that came out. The first one's last Monday. There were 3 that came out. Of the 3, I guess the one that was most independent was for a Baton Rouge NBC affiliate, something called JMC Analytics, and it was surprising at the time in that it had John Bell Edwards leading 52-32. There were 2 other polls that came out around the same time, and they had pretty much the same numbers, and so that was a substantial lead. Of course, people always challenge the validity of polls, but also the science is pretty refined too. They're probably a good indication of what the attitude is that day. Now, today, the website, the Hayride, reported on a poll by a group called Triumph Media, and they're out of Jacksonville, and they do a lot of polling for Republicans, and so if there's a slant, it's that way. But even a Republican pollster was showing Edwards leading 49-41, which is still, you know, a good lead considering that Edwards started as the person who was running behind, and so that's you know, there's still the debate ahead. There's still a television campaign. Vitter is going heavily on Obama on his campaign. But you know, the other thing was the endorsement of. By Joe Darden, by Jay Darden,
yeah.
of Edwards this week, and some comments about, well, here's a Republican endorsing a Democrat, and somebody compared it to Benedict Arnold and all of that, as though it has never happened that somebody has crossed party lines. You know, if you look at the Republican Party in the South, that, you know, from the 60s on, after the Civil Rights Bill was passed, just about everybody who became a Republican was somebody who was a Democrat before, because it used to be everybody guy was a Democrat. And so there was a wholesale conversion of people leaving the Democratic Party for the Republican Party. Just about every suburban politician, during that time started off as a Democrat and became a Republican. And so it's not unusual for people to change their minds about parties. And then even within the parties, there's degrees of belief. There are some people who are like middle of the road party. It's kind of like religion. And there are some people who are at the extremes. And so I don't think I think Darden was more of a middle of the road. But I just want to mention there was an election in '79 in which Dave Treen ran against 4 Democrats. And in the primary, Treen got into the runoff against what looked like was going to be, at the time, Lieutenant Governor Jimmy Fitzmaurice, who was a Democrat. But then as the final votes came in, Louis Lambert, who was a public service commissioner, pulled ahead. Well, this was a huge ruckus, and there was a lawsuit, and the Fitzmaurice people claimed that the election was rigged, and it became very, very bitter. There were 4 Democrats who ran in that election. All 4 of them endorsed Treen, who was a Republican. And so just tell us, and so this is not unusual, okay, to see this and to call somebody a Benedict Arnold, it's kind of a matter of perspective.
And Treen, of course, went on to become our governor.
He did. He won that election and then became governor. So
now, Errol, what do you make of this endorsement, which I found significant, didn't get as much play as the Darden endorsement, which was the Louisiana Sheriff's Association for Edwards in a red state. These are powerful officials in their respective parishes. In rural parishes, the strongest elected official.
And they're running a spot on it, too. They've done a spot for him. Yeah.
And that would seem to be a blow to Vitter, to have these boots on the ground throughout the state.
And they moved quickly, and I think that was just a case of Edwards having his politics together and being organized down at the parish level. And it was a very impressive endorsement.
And we haven't heard anything from Scott Angel. However, some of his big supporters are holding a fundraiser for Edwards.
Right.
Coming up, there is going to be a debate, as Errol mentioned. And it's going to be here on WYES. It's a statewide debate. I think LPB is hosting it. We're carrying it. It'll be 7 p.m. on this Tuesday, so it'll be a good one to watch between our 2 candidates. All right, the Saints. What can we say? What's happened? I mean, we like it and we want it to continue, but what's going on with Rob Ryan? I mean, was he worried about maybe losing his job?
I don't think it was ever that serious. Certainly, his job security was in question, I think, by the end of the season. But more importantly, the Saints have resurrected their season. They look kind of lost there after a 1-4 start, and they've won now 3 in a row, 4 of their last 5. And Sean Payton has a phrase he often quotes Bill Parcells, his mentor, that every week in the NFL is either a crisis or a carnival. We're in carnival season right now with the Saints. I mean, everything's great, and I want to temper that enthusiasm a little bit. I think they've played 3 teams lately that they match up very well against. 3 teams built a lot like the Saints, and the Colts, Falcons, and Giants, built around a quarterback, not very good defensively, and teams that the Saints, frankly, can shred offensively, as we saw last week against the Giants. Without any pass rush on Drew Brees, he's still very good at age 36 and capable of lighting you up defensively, and that's exactly what he did. It was a record-setting day, really a dramatic game, too. You'd think when you score 52 points,
you should have a big lead.
Yeah, you should win in hand, but not with this Saints team. Defensively, they're still pretty vulnerable, and that's why I temper everybody's expectations right now. Now, on the encouraging side, they do play a lot of very winnable games coming up. This weekend, they play the Tennessee Titans, who just fired their coach on Tuesday, so they're in a little bit of disarray in Tennessee. They have a rookie quarterback. You'd think if they play a decent game that they should win that game.
And now an interim head coach.
Right, yeah. Exactly. But then they play 2 games that I consider to be those 50-50 coin flip games. They go to Washington and to Houston, sandwiched around an open date. Both those games, I think, if they can win at least one of those 2, I think they've got a great shot of making a playoff run.
My ability to ask you technical questions is highly limited, so I once again went to my main Saints advisor, who happens to be my youngest child, my son Mike, and he sent a couple of questions. Let's take a look at the first one that he sent for you to answer, Jeff. Is Rob Ryan to blame for the Saints' defensive failures, i.e. the lack of presence from the safety position, lack of a consistent pass rush, or is it the lack of depth?
Well, that's a good question. I would say it's more personnel related. Now, Rob Ryan has had his struggles in other spots. He struggled in Cleveland as a coordinator. He struggled in Dallas, lost his job there. So by no means is he, not somewhat accountable for the defensive failures. But I think they're playing so many young players. I mean, the front seven of this defense, there's only one real player that's come back from last year, and that's Cameron Jordan. Everybody else is a rookie or a first-year player or a guy that's new to the roster. And I think that's going to take some time. And I don't think there's anybody in that group that anybody else in the NFL thinks is a great defensive player either. So I think Rob Ryan's working with a little bit of limited resources right now in defense.
So I have a question for you, Jeff. Does this, among the people who watch very closely, does this silence the critics who are saying that Drew Brees might have been past his prime, lost the arm strength, age finally catching up, passing for over 500 yards, 7 touchdowns?
Yeah, I don't see how anybody could complain about Drew Brees right now. I don't get any emails, I don't get any tweets about Drew Brees being 36. I think what happens week to week when a team loses, there's a lot of overreaction, and immediately you go to Drew Brees, who's the quarterback, and they take the share of the blame. And he is 36, and he's making a lot of money, so that's an easy target. But he's playing as well as I've ever seen him play, and no one's complaining about him anymore.
One more Mike question. Let's put this up real quick and get you to answer this one. The Saints are number 2 total offense, number 31 total defense. Can they compete in the playoffs if they do make it?
Well, I think they could compete. I don't think they're going to go far if they do make it. And they've got an uphill battle to get there. I mean, Carolina is winning the division at 7-0. They're not coming back to the pack, I don't think, anytime soon. The team they have a chance at catching is Atlanta, who's 5-2. They've already beaten once. But if they get in there, they're a dangerous team. As long as Drew Brees is playing as well as he is, they're dangerous. I just don't think they have the firepower to challenge the elite teams like Green Bay right now. That seems to be the class of the NFC.
All we can say is keep it up.
Are the Saints missing Jimmy Graham?
Not as much as I thought they would. I was among the people that criticized them for that trade, and Benjamin Watson has found the fountain of youth at age 34. He's actually out-producing Jimmy Graham right now, so they've managed to compensate for that.
Okay, we want to see another win. Thank you this weekend. All right, Future Watch, Dawn.
We've got 2 different initiatives that both are kind of outside-of-the-box thinking ways to reduce violence in the city. One came out of the coroner's office. It really is, as Jeffrey Rouse told me this week, straight up from my brain. It's not modeled on somebody else's idea. It's not being done, as we know, in another city. It's a partnership between the coroner's office and the organization Silence is Violence, which is a victims advocacy group. And these are people who had some experience with violence themselves, and they go out to the crime scene. When the coroner's office is called to investigate a homicide, someone from Silence is Violence gets a call, and they go too. And as they told me, they're the person who goes and stays on this side of the police crime tape, finds the victim's family, takes that hand, holds that hand, and said, I'm going to be with you through this whole process. I'm going to help you figure this out tonight, today, this morning, whatever. But I'm also going to be with you in court and after court. And when you need help getting the Victims Reparation Board to give you some money, I'm going to be there. And the idea is, if they're there right then and there, they can maybe form those relationships with the people who have been victims to prevent some of the retaliatory murders from happening. Say, the process will work, let it work. See that rage maybe firsthand in a family member of a lost loved one, and maybe be able to tackle it by building relationships. The other initiative is also based on building relationships and building community. It's an initiative that the city took on called Welcome Table New Orleans. It's a 3-year project funded by the Kellogg Foundation. With 8 different circles, and basically groups who will circle up and huddle up. And most of them are based on neighborhoods. There's a Central City Circle, St. Roch, Algiers, Carrollton, Mid-City, New Orleans East. And then there's a circle of business and civic leaders, and there's a Mother's Circle. And this Mother's Circle is, the idea is to get mothers of victims as well as mothers of perpetrators to sit down together, not necessarily the same crime, but to sit down together. They're both mothers who have lost children by one side of that issue, and work on reconciliation. And these mothers have met for over a year now, and they have a 3-part, the goal is to come up with a reconciliation project. A 3-part plan that will start with a march and a second line, which will really be like a funeral to bury violence in the city. Then to have a community gala to get more people involved and get some resources, and finally end it with an education piece, which is community education, workshops on transferring the tragedy to triumph. Basically, the idea is to get people becoming a village again. Know your next door neighbor. Know the person next door to your next door neighbor. Know what your own children are doing. Kind of build a community that will try to quell the violence. And a lot of it, because it's so much boy on boy, young man on young man, and stemmed from retaliatory killings, they feel like if they can build a better community and have more ears listening and eyes watching, it sounds really actually very old school. Let's build a neighborhood again where people care about each other and help them sit down and learn to care about each other. And if at the very root level of it, a mother of a shooter and a mother of the child who died can become friends, well, then can't we all? So that's the goal.
Of course, the mayor has had his NOLA for Life project also, and incorporated in that is a program called Ceasefire, which sort of has that sort of same philosophy. It's just a more grassroots and getting down individually to the
very down to the individuals, helping mothers help other mothers, and really is a call to, as they told me today, all mothers in the city. This is all of our responsibility to say, you know, you might not be directly involved in this, but if you as a mother can support another mother and the community grows, it's all for the betterment.
And of course, are we seeing this impact our murder rates? Has the murder rate dropped, would you say, Mike?
Well,
not from these new initiatives.
We're still ahead of the murder rate from last year. We had the police department, despite all the challenges, had a surprising October in which there were only 3 homicides recorded. That's the lowest in decades. But that comes at a time when they were at a very healthy clip ahead of last year. Now they're just narrowly ahead of last year's pace. But all of that is unacceptable when you look at New Orleans compared to other cities. The per capita murder rate is traditionally top 10, if not top 5, and it's still coming in at about that level. So, there is no celebration. And I got to tell you, the cops on the street are the first ones to. It's almost a matter of superstition not to ever brag or boast about. We haven't gone a week without a murder, because as soon as you say that, something bad happens.
It's like saying it in a newsroom.
Newsroom, same thing. We were actually talking about it. I think there had only been 1 homicide as of October 29th, and sure enough, had a little discussion about whether that's a story, murder the next day. So police, they don't look at the spikes up or down in 1 month, but you really have to wait till the end of the year to kind of see the overall trend.
Some of the big gang, like the Telly Hankton group and all of that, are they having less of an impact now?
Well, I will say that the NOLA for Life, Ceasefire, the call-ins of probationers being read the riot act by, mayors, judges, police chief. They just had one yesterday, as a matter of fact. That seems to be having an impact. And the gang and drug gang-related shootings and killings are down significantly. There are some academics who are actually studying the effects of ceasefire, whether that's taking hold. That, unfortunately, has been replaced by domestic disputes and just arguments among people who know one another, escalating to the point of violence, gunfire, and sometimes murder.
And as Don was just telling us about, those programs are really sort of aimed, that you were describing, at combating that. So
getting to know your neighbor, so you know if that person next door has trouble.
So we can continue
Still
to see the murder rate drop.
Still a far too violent city.
All right, Mike, thanks. Let's go back to sports before we let Jeff go here. Pelicans. Not looking so good in the beginning of their season.
No carnival season for Pelicans. 0-4. This is not the start that new coach Alvin Gentry or general manager Dell Demps envisioned. Now, 2 of those 4 games were against the defending NBA champion Golden State Warriors, so that's kind of to be expected. They're playing fabulous right now. But I think the real concern right now is the injuries to the lineup have decimated, and this is a well-worn record that's been played over and over in New Orleans. The injuries just have mounted ever since this regime has been intact. And
although first time they've hit during the preseason, right? Can't even field a
and
team.
They're already falling far behind their competitors right now. Anthony Davis, the young superstar, 22-year-old star, really struggling in the new transition under the new coach, the new offensive system that he's employed. It was supposed to actually benefit him and make him take his game to another level. It's been the exact opposite, and he looks disillusioned right now. And they've got some problems out there, and they've got to get them fixed because people are not showing up to the games already. And I think that's going to be a concern for Tom Benson going forward.
Isn't it usually a rough time to get people to go to games, though, this time?
Yes, very much. In New Orleans, traditionally, no one starts thinking basketball till like January. But there was some excitement this year, I think, especially with the ascension of Anthony Davis, the team making the playoffs last year. They had some momentum, a new coach in town. Hasn't translated right now, and I think it's a real concern at upper management and at ownership.
Well, fans really look for a team to, continue to sort of progress season to season. That's especially true in the NBA. Once you make the playoffs and you want to, make a long run in the playoffs.
Take the next step, right?
The Pelicans barely stuck into the playoffs with that 8 seed, and now it looks like they've regressed and maybe on the outside looking in.
And you just don't know when some of these players are going to come back because they have so many injuries. So look, it's a long season. I mean, we're 4 games into an 82-game season.
So it is just
So
the
they could
start.
finish
Yes.
76-4.
Yes, if you want to be the bright side, yes.
And the Saints started 0-4, and they turned around.
Right.
So isn't one of the problems that the other teams are all ganging up on Anthony Davis?
A little bit, but that happened last year too, and they're not reacting right now. This offensive system has really, I think, been slower to take hold than they expected.
And real quick, sort of maybe a yes or no, is Mickey Loomis handling too much with both teams?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that affects what's going on right now at all.
Okie doke. All right, time to look ahead. Errol.
The Lafitte Greenway was officially dedicated today. This is a bike path along an old railroad bed that runs from the French Quarter to North Alexander Street, which is near City Park, only 4 blocks away from City Park. So now you can have a safe greenway to ride bikes from the Quarter down to the City Park.
It's a great idea. Mike.
Yeah, I have another special investigative report coming out 10 o'clock on Monday looking at judges for their continuing legal education travel to very posh and expensive resorts.
All righty, thank you.
This might make some people groan, others cheer. The holiday season is actually upon us already. Canal Street is lighting up its trees November 22nd, which is
Already.
2.5 weeks away at 5 o'clock at the Astrocom Plaza.
All righty, Don. Thanks, Jeff.
Well, it's a big weekend for college football, big Saturday. Tulane has its homecoming over uptown on campus against the University of Connecticut at 3 o'clock, and then where I will be over in Alabama, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, the big showdown with Alabama and LSU, 2 top 10 teams, undefeated LSU. If they win that game, has a great shot at making the SEC title game and the college football playoff.
Big game prediction on that one.
I like LSU. I like the mindset they're taking in this game. They've lost 4 in a row to Alabama. It's time.
All righty. And remember, this Tuesday night debate, you can watch it, Governor's Debate, here on WYES, 7 p.m. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.